with such luminaries that you had heard this morning. And especially, I think the person who really deserves praise is the editor, author of this comparative dictionary of Tamil and Indo-European languages, R.R. Sendhiran, and the publisher, Oxford University Press. I don't think this, when I looked at the volumes of this dictionary, I couldn't believe that this is a work of a one lifetime. You need several lives to do this kind of an intensive and extensive work. So my heartiest congratulations to the Dr. R.R. Sendhiran and of course his team who had been helping him. I feel really privileged to address you very briefly on this Mother Language Day, which was created by Bangladesh, as you know, and it gave genesis to the whole country, because 4 students laid their lives on this very day fighting against the hegemony of one language, which was Bangla, which was Urdu, and they wanted Bangla to be instituted. Anyway, that is a history, but I'm happy that UNESCO has declared February 21st as the Mother Language Day, International Mother Language Day, and I happen to be fortunate enough to speak to various different kind of audiences about how important it is to save each and every language that human beings have been speaking and are speaking. It's a very significant aspect of our life. Coming to the dictionary that we are here for the launch, I will just I'll raise a couple of issues and questions to begin with, which had been bothering me because I also was fortunate enough to work and compile a dictionary of the Great Andamanese language, which I'll come to it briefly. Establishing a genetic relationship between languages or language families traditionally relies on the assumption of monogenesis, the hypothesis that languages descend from a single ancestral source and exhibit systematic sound meaning correspondences beyond the scope of contact and borrowing. This monolithic paradigm has long been presented some conceptual challenges. When we consider the linguistic and diverse landscape, I call it landscape, not landscape, of the world because we have so many languages in a geographical area, it becomes reasonable to question whether monogenesis is the most accurate framework for understanding language relationships. Human beings have been on this earth for 7 million years, as now the geneticists show, and perhaps the human speech evolved after 50,000 years, we are not very sure, but still the monogenesis hypothesis seems a little questionable. An alternative view allows us to imagine language evolution as either A, multiple language groups coexisting symbiotically within a shared biocultural environment, much like the diverse flora of a forest. Or you have a B option to think the growth of a banyan tree where numerous trunks emerge from intertwined roots rising independently yet touching at various points. In this model, in the second model, adjacency fosters similarity, and the touching of linguistic branches creates opportunities for structural and lexical cross-influences. The case of Old Tamil and Indo-European languages may be better understood through this lens, and this is what I come to after reading the Etymological Dictionary 1 volume, that the languages that separated early, developed independently, yet remained in intermittent contact across identifiable geographical zones inhabited by both Dravidian and the Indo-European speakers. Historical linguistic scholarship, including the works of Caldwell 1856 or Levitt 2014 and Arasendiran's 2001, has attempted to demonstrate a relationship between Old Tamil and Indo-European languages. Some arguments even extend Tamil connections to Australian Aboriginal languages, speculating that early migrants carried proto-forms across continents roughly 50,000 years ago. This is Dr. Arasendiram's research. However, genetic studies position the Great Andamanis as one of the world's oldest populations, having lived in isolation in the Andaman Islands until the late 19th century. The Great Andamanis language family, which had 10 languages in its fold, originally comprised 10 different communities or 10 different tribes, and all languages were not mutually intelligible. But today, the present-day Great Andamanis survives only through 4 semi-speakers representing a blend of the northern varieties called Jero, Khora, Sare, and Bo. Fortunately, when I reached the Andaman Islands in 2000, I could connect to 9 or 10 speakers, semi-speakers I should say some of them were. But now, as of today, there are only 4 speakers left, and they also have stopped speaking the language among themselves. My fieldwork with the Great Andamanis community enabled the documentation of exceptionally archaic linguistic system and the development of a multilingual interactive dictionary. Multilingual, multiscriptal, interactive with sound files and images. If I have time, I'll just give you a demo for 2-3 minutes. But this is what we could achieve. However, compiling a dictionary of a moribund language requires far more than a word list. It demands an integrated account of indigenous ecological knowledge, worldview, and cultural memory, elements essential for understanding linguistic meaning in context. And the same requirement is also there for creating an etymological dictionary. No comparative research to date has exposed systematic relationships between Dravidian and Great Andamanis. A study of Old Tamil alongside Great Andamanis could, I would say, illuminate early patterns of language genesis. Because you see, Andamanis migrated to the island 70,000 years ago. They are remnants of the first migration out of Africa. And they have, in their language, there are some very archaic features. In fact, the grammar is very archaic. So there is, my request and my submission is that it may lead to some interesting findings if we compare Old Tamil with Great Andamanis. This inquiry is especially relevant considering linguistic and genetic evidence shows that Austroasiatic, Dravidian and Indo-Aryan groups coexisted in the subcontinent before Indo-Aryan migrations, resulting in shared lexical and grammatical features. Substratum influences of Austroasiatic on pre-Vedic, Zola 2023, his monumental work, and Iranian and Sanskrit, Abbi 1991, I showed this in 1991, have been well documented. Earlier research by me, 1991, identified patterns of reduplication across grammatical categories as evidence of undocumented early contact between Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, and Austroasiatic as far back as 3,500 before present. These findings raised renewed questions about Dravidian migration pathways, whether movement occurred north to south or south to north. Given that the Great Andamanis predates Jarva and Onge, the latter migrating 50,000 years ago, any discussion of the antiquity of Tamil must consider this family, yet it remains largely absent from nostratic and macro-family studies. A central issue in compiling an etymological dictionary is the phenomenon of semantic shift. Semantic shift refers to the diachronic transition from meaning A to meaning B, observed through polysemy, cognates, derivation, or borrowing. Identifying semantic shift between Old Tamil and non-Dravidian languages such as Indo-European is challenging, yet feasible through rigorous lexicographic analysis supported by natural language processing. I'll just mention a couple of Old Tamil demo which gives you a semantic shift. For example, the word for eye in Tamil is kan, but the meaning changes to sight and desire and even for knowledge. Similarly, the word for body in Tamil is me, but now it is also used for sense or truth. Or the word for aru, river, now it also means road, means as well as morality. So another challenge involved in etymological dictionary is grammaticalization. When lexical forms evolve into grammatical markers, as with English ed suffix for past tense, ad like worked, or one numeral 1, becoming the indefinite article a or n, and ad came from the word did. So such grammaticalization process when lexical item changes into grammatical forms are very much have to be taken into consideration when one is producing etymological dictionary. Now coming to the challenges of producing this Great Andamanese dictionary were plenty, because number one, it was a dying language. The other was that there were a lot of variation, among the speakers. It happens when the language is dying, there's a lot of variation you cannot help. So I thought I will give you just a 2-3 minutes demo that how much we try to document and have been able to document, because I lived in the jungles intermittently for 3 to 4 years, not going every time because JNU does not give you. I taught in JNU for 40 years, almost 40 years. But this is a multilingual, multiscriptal dictionary. As you can see on your screen, this is the bird's eye view where the phonetic transcription is used, and you can easily click on a lexeme, and you can not only see it in phonetic transcription, you can hear the sound. And this is a sound made by the native speaker. He is no more. You see, so this is very important that we could document his way of speaking this word. It means basically side, and it has also mean other things. There's a sentence, example sentence also, and there are many it's in polysemous and it is cross references, and you can easily go to the cross references by clicking one of the cross references here. So this is another lexeme which is related to it, and now this is an etymology. I could find out this is a Bo language, another variety spoken by Boa Senior, and she was the last speaker of Bo. She is no more, but her 39% of words from Bo are documented in this dictionary, and Bo is a very old language. You see, Great Andamanese constitute of two different kind of tribes. One was seafarers. So their dictionary, or let's say their lexicon, their vocabulary is full of sea-related terms. Sea-related, boat-related, you name it, and lots of hunting animals of the sea. And I collected more than 157 words for fishes alone, and corals, and various kinds of seashores. There are 6 kinds of seashores. So, the kind of amazing knowledge that I got living with these people was something very different, coming from Delhi, and an urban girl, a woman. I never anticipated this. Another community comes from the forest area, the deep inside the forest, and their vocabulary and their contextual vocabulary, I should say, was very different from the seafarers. They were more talking about the forest, the birds, and in this dictionary, I'll tell you, you can go to the English version, and here you just type bird and you will get all the words from birds. And look at this is a whole list of birds. There are 97 words for birds alone, and each bird is, we try to match it with the scientific names later on. but here this is this is not a, there is no image here, but there are images like Balat Bai. Now there is a sound also.
Balat Bai.
And you can see there's a, so the words had to be collected in the context. And since the Andaman forests are very old tropical forest, if anybody is expert, hunter-gatherers always are expert in birds. One can match with the environment where they lived. Similarly, if you are trying to establish Old Tamil and Indo-European connection, then one also has to see where the communities lived. Did they share their ecology? If they shared, they must have shared the ecology if they must have lived in this, in the same geographical area. And when it comes to sharing the ecology, depending upon whether they were by the side of the sea or inside the forest, there are many items that can lead to this. But most important is looking at the language, or getting exposure to the language. I had to divide my dictionary entries into 63 different semantic domains. And one has to start with semantic domains, that is in which area you are going to collect words. And those areas are restricted by the language that you are investigating. So you can see we have so many categories: activity, event, address term, animal, attribute, bird, boat related, body term. So for example, boat related, there are so many words. You see? So by these categories, we got this is Chongyo. And Chongyo is a bow word, so etymology is bow. Because this particular outrigger boat has several words in Great Andamanese, but each language had different one. And so we could identify the etymology because this was given by us, Boa Senior, who was the last speaker of Bow. So what I am trying to say is that to make a good etymological dictionary or to any comprehensive dictionary, one has to first divide the language pertaining to its area of speech, pertaining to the speakers, the kind of speakers they have, how many ways you can think of collecting words in which areas. Even for illnesses, I thought the Andamanis will not have much illnesses, but we could collect so many illnesses names, and each illness is a different kind, and every illness has a cure in one of the medicinal plant which is growing nearby. So you had the medicinal plants names also. So when you come to plants, for example, we have so many varieties of plants and creepers noticed, and many of the plants and creepers are even now known by the scientific names for their advantages, which is more or less the same that they had documented. And this is the very interesting, and this is also as I said, it's a trilingual dictionary. It's also in Hindi, because the state language of Andaman and Nicobar is Hindi. So I thought it would be better to give a Hindi translation with Devanagari so that each and every person can read it. And there are abstract concepts also, like psychological predicates, like to be hungry, or there are very interesting aspects of space. Now space is construed by hunter and gatherers very differently than the civilization that we live in. And in this, there was many types of deictic phenomena. And to conclude, I would say there's a very interesting kinship term that I came across while collecting the kinship terminology, which also shows the relationship or the intimate relationship between the family members. If a husband dies of a woman, we have a word in most of the Indian languages for the widow. If the parents die of children, we have the word for the orphans. But if your brother or sister die, we don't have any word. Do we have a word for kinship for a person who has lost his sibling? We don't. But this language has, and it's called Rapuch. And I started my collection in the fieldwork to share my personal experiences that I was not getting any information because tribes were trying to shun me out. They said, forget it, just leave it, leave this place, we don't want to talk to you. And once this now junior, my main, whom I call my guru, I said, why do you always, rebuke me and tell me to go. He says, don't you know I'm a Rapuch, I'm not supposed to speak to you. I said, why you are a Rapuch? What is a Rapuch? And he says, I lost my elder brother recently, I'm a Rapuch. And I said, listen now Junior, I lost my younger sister last year. So I'm a Rapuch too. And he got so intimately, he felt so intimate to me. He immediately shook my hands, he had tears in his eyes, and he said, oh, you are a Rapuch, I'm a Rapuch. And since that day, I had no problem interacting with him because he thought I was one of them. So, this is one of my experiences of fieldwork, but it gave me a new insight into the society, their human relations, and how do they mourn or care for their relations. Thank you.